Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S.
Canada's energy controls, a challenge to the U.S.? Amid escalating economic tensions, Canada has unexpectedly played a powerful card: energy. With over $70 billion worth of crude oil and 9 billion cubic meters of LNG exported to the U.S. each year, Ottawa is not just a trade partner, but is also becoming the valve for the energy lifeblood of many U.S. states. The warning strike has become clearer than ever when Ontario, Canada's largest industrial province, announced a 25% tax on electricity exports to the U.S. If this measure is widely implemented, a large portion of the U.S. power grid would face the risk of paralysis. Many states in the U.S. rely on cross-border electricity from the north, especially during the winter when energy demand surges. In my view, this is not just a retaliatory move, but a warning that Canada has the power to control the life and death switch of the U.S. economy if needed. Controlling electricity is just the tip of the iceberg. Ottawa also holds over a fifth of the crude oil the U.S. imports, and this is no small number in the world's leading energy economy. Adding liquefied natural gas, LNG, vital for heating systems, transportation, and heavy industry, Canada clearly holds the trump cards that could send a chill down the spine of the U.S. economy if withdrawn. The message from the North is crystal clear. If Washington continues to pressure Ottawa with unfavorable trade policies, Canada has the ability to sever vital lifelines to the U.S. It is no longer just a matter of prices and tariffs. Energy is now being used as a new geopolitical tool. The U.S. was once the active player in the global trade war, but this time, Canada is showing that it is not afraid to strike back, and could even land a devastating blow to U.S. infrastructure vulnerabilities. If Washington does not reassess its energy dependence, a future where the lights go out may no longer be a distant prospect. Canada-U.S. energy relations turn into a high-risk gamble. The once sustainable energy relationship between Canada and the United States is now turning into a dangerous gamble, where any misstep could lead to consequences far beyond oil or electricity. This confrontation has transcended the energy sector and shifted towards other strategic industries, including automobiles. In 2024, Canada exported more than $30 billion worth of cars and parts to the U.S., a crucial element in the long-standing bilateral economic relationship between the two countries. But when the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on imported cars, Ottawa responded swiftly and sharply. Canada countered by removing tax incentives for U.S.-made electric vehicles, particularly models from Tesla, a brand considered a symbol of the U.S. electric vehicle industry. This not only increased the cost of electric cars in the U.S., but also severely threatened the parts supply chain that has been tightly integrated between Canada and assembly plants in Detroit. The consequences are clear. Car prices in the U.S. will skyrocket. Consumers will be pushed out of the electric vehicle market at a time when the U.S. needs to transition to green energy. At the same time, the shortage of parts from Canada could push factories in Detroit into production crises, causing costs to soar and placing the U.S. auto industry in an unprecedented situation. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada and one of the prominent economic strategists, bluntly warned, "The economic cooperation between the two countries is on the brink of collapse due to blind protectionism and poorly calculated retaliation." From a once praised model of cooperation, U.S.-Canada relations are now sliding into an economic battleground, where tariffs and policy incentives are becoming strategic weapons just as potent as military ones. In this new geopolitical era, economic decisions can cause damage as profound as an armed conflict. In my view, when the economy becomes a weapon, any poorly considered policy could ignite a covert conflict more dangerous than the modern-day Cold War. Canada's agricultural threat, a blow to U.S. food prices? Each year, the U.S. and Canada conduct agricultural trade worth nearly $45 billion, primarily focused on strategic products like canola, wheat, meat, and dairy. However, recent trade tensions have put this relationship on high alert. Mark Carney, the architect of Canada's economic policies, recently launched a well-calculated counterattack, threatening to impose retaliatory tariffs on canola, an export product worth $6 billion annually. If this becomes reality, meat and dairy prices at U.S. supermarkets could skyrocket, pushing food inflation to a new high. Experts warn, if Canada actually shuts off the agricultural valve, American consumers will feel the impact most acutely, through the very essential items in their daily shopping baskets. But Carney did not stop at tariffs. He quickly shifted to a longer-term strategy, negotiating with European and Asian partners to find alternative markets to the U.S. Preliminary agreements have already been signed with France and the United Kingdom, paving the way for reshaping supply chains in energy and the automobile industry. This is seen as a pivotal step for Canada to gradually distance itself from the shadow of the U.S. in foreign and economic policies. When European media asked, "Is Canada distancing itself from the U.S.?" Carney gave a straightforward answer without hesitation. Canada's retaliation, redefining economic strategy. The message Canada is sending to Washington is crystal clear. This is not just a single act of retaliation, but the beginning of a comprehensive restructuring strategy that spans energy, automobiles, and agriculture. In the tariff war initiated by the U.S., Canada is launching powerful economic strikes, capable of disrupting the very foundation of the protectionist policies led by Trump. Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Canadian government have shown unprecedented firmness. Not only are they not shying away from retaliatory measures, but they are also proactively building an independent economic strategy with a clear goal: to break free from traditional reliance on the U.S. market. A major question arises: how will Washington respond to a Canada that is making bold moves and turning towards Europe and Asia as new strategic partners? With agreements being advanced with the UK, France, and several Asian nations, Canada has the potential to establish a new trade network, significantly reducing the influence of the U.S. If retaliatory measures are fully implemented, the U.S. economy will face a severe crisis, not only due to rising prices but also due to fractures in its domestic supply system. These economic strikes are not simply causing market disruption. They could upend the entire economic order of North America, which has long been considered a model of economic integration. This is a major turning point. A trade war is no longer confined to the realm of tariffs, but could reshape the future economies of both countries. In my view, Canada is no longer just reacting. They are actively rewriting the regional economic rulebook, forcing the U.S. to reassess its own position. Donald Trump, paper hero or a coward in a strong man's disguise? Former President Donald Trump has recently become the target of harsh criticism, this time from a former ally within the Republican Party, former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Using uncompromising language, Kinzinger called Trump a coward weaker than a gummy bear in a microwave, someone who only plays the role of a hero in disguise but is absent exactly when America needs true leadership. So, what prompted Kinzinger to speak out so strongly? To understand this, we need to look back at a historic event, January 6, 2021, when the U.S. Capitol building was attacked. In that moment of chaos, as lawmakers were urgently evacuated and the entire nation watched in shock and concern, Trump almost disappeared. He did not immediately call for the violence to stop, did not appear to reassure the public, and did not act like a president managing a country in crisis. Kinzinger, one of the few Republicans involved in investigating the riot, has broken his silence. He believes that Trump not only failed in his leadership role, but also pretended to be strong to conceal his weakness and lack of responsibility. Trump, a leader without courage or just a spectator? Instead of stepping up to lead the country through a moment of chaos, Donald Trump sat in the White House watching the January 6th attack as if it were a reality TV show. Such an action, according to many, cannot be considered brave, let alone the mark of a true leader. Former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who served in the U.S. military in the Iraq War, has unreservedly pointed out the difference between true courage and the so-called patriotism that Trump often claims for himself. With battlefield experience, Kinzinger knows that courage is not found in loud speeches or social media performances. It lies in sacrifice, in placing the nation's and others' interests above one's own ego. According to him, Trump cannot understand the sacrifices that soldiers make because, in his mind, nothing is more important than himself. With such a massive ego, Trump could never imagine fighting for an ideal that transcends personal gain. What adds to the contradiction is that the man who avoided military service and publicly insulted veterans like Senator John McCain constantly claims to be a true patriot. When hypocrisy is unveiled, Trump, WWE wrestler, or a true leader? In a pointed and somewhat sarcastic statement, former Congressman Adam Kinzinger compared Donald Trump to a WWE wrestler. Someone who is good at striking poses, shouting on stage, and performing scripted fictional roles. According to Kinzinger, what Trump presents to the public is nothing more than a thin veneer, a carefully crafted image to conceal his true self. A fragile, vulnerable individual who constantly seeks validation from others to feel worthy. Kinzinger argues that this dependency on flattery not only raises doubts about Trump's leadership abilities, but also casts a big question mark over his mental fortitude. Can someone like him truly be strong enough to face real crises? And Kinzinger didn't stop there. In a humorous yet somewhat odd detail, he revealed another aspect few dare to mention: Donald Trump's body odor. While not stating it explicitly, Kinzinger's reference to this issue led many to understand that he was attempting to expose the true image behind the polished suit, that Trump's insecurity, imperfection, and even his inauthenticity are not just mental traits, but are reflected in the most basic and, well, human ways. Overall, Kinzinger is sending a clear message. Behind the stage lights, behind the chants of "Make America Great Again," Donald Trump may not be the strong figure he claims to be, but rather a performance protected by illusion, flattery, and a highly crafted political disguise. Trump may be a star on the political stage, but in reality, he is playing the role of a false hero in a play he created, where the truth is always hidden behind a dazzling exterior. This is my opinion. What do you think? Donald Trump, when the hero can't handle a criticism. According to Adam Kinzinger, one of Donald Trump's greatest weaknesses lies in something seemingly minor. He cannot handle criticism. Whenever he is attacked or faces criticism, Trump reacts weakly, defensively, like a child who needs to be comforted. Kinzinger points out that Trump frequently needs someone by his side to tell him, "You're very special." This is not just a habit, but an emotional dependency, showing that he lacks the inner strength that a true leader must possess. Whenever faced with difficulty or failure, Trump almost immediately takes on the role of the victim, avoiding responsibility and never confronting the truth head-on. For Kinzinger, this is not only a sign of a lack of courage, but also clear evidence that Trump is not a courageous leader, but rather a false hero who cannot withstand the pressure of reality. Donald Trump, true leader or illusion of praise? In recent sharp criticisms, former Congressman Adam Kinzinger exposed what many had long felt. Trump not only lacks the ability to accept criticism, but also reacts extremely weakly whenever attacked. According to Kinzinger, Trump often needs to be reassured, needing to hear "you are very special" to feel secure. And every time faced with difficulty, he plays the victim, avoiding the truth and responsibility. Trump always creates a false facade to hide the fear and insecurity inside, making him an unreliable leader. Kinzinger, as a veteran who served in Iraq, understands well. Courage does not come from shouting the loudest or appearing strong on the outside, but from the ability to face the truth and admit mistakes. The internal division within the Republican Party is deepening. Kinzinger not only targets Trump personally, but also raises the big question about the moral values and leadership qualities within the Republican Party. The fact that Trump remains the central figure of the party is not only a power issue, but also the question: do we accept a leader built on illusions and personal worship rather than on strength and principles? The tariff war heading towards economic disaster. Alongside internal disputes, the tariff policies imposed by Trump are creating a massive economic storm. Since Trump announced a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel, key partners like Canada and the European Union, EU, have reacted strongly. Canada retaliated with tariffs worth up to $16.6 billion on U.S. goods, including aluminum, steel, and consumer products. The EU not only imposed tariffs worth $28 billion, but also set long-term strategies to protect its internal industries and reduce dependency on the U.S. market. According to the World Trade Organization, WTO data, U.S. exports to the EU and Canada dropped sharply just 1 month after the tariffs were imposed. Steel production in the U.S. fell some 8% in the first quarter of 2025, the steepest decline in 5 years. Material costs increased, while U.S. businesses faced intense competition and a loss of confidence in the market. The market in turmoil. U.S. consumers pay the price. S&P 500 dropped by 12%, and Dow Jones fell by 10%. Stocks of companies like FedEx, GM, and Boeing plunged by 3 to 5%. U.S. consumers are paying the price. Car prices and electronics surged by 5% to 15%. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs warned, without a policy change, the U.S. economy could slip into a recession by the end of 2025. U.S. slaps 50% tariff on Canada, become the 51st state. On March 10, 2025, the U.S. declared a 50% tariff on all imports from Canada, which would only be lifted if Canada agreed to become a state of the U.S. This unprecedented policy caused an uproar among scholars, businesses, and politicians. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau immediately opposed it. Canada is not for sale. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable. Ontario Premier Doug Ford bluntly stated, U.S. businesses are terrified of this policy but are too afraid to speak out. Canada is ready to retaliate. Experts warned, food prices in the U.S. could rise by 8 to 12%. Amazon, Walmart, Tesla, and Ford all reacted. Supply chains will be disrupted, prices will skyrocket, and U.S. consumers will bear the brunt. Canada shifts to Asia, stepping out of the U.S. shadow. With Asia's energy demand projected to rise by 35% by 2040, Canada is executing a strategy to break free from U.S. dependency, focusing on expanding the $21 billion Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion project. LNG Canada, a $40 billion project for exporting liquefied natural gas to Japan, South Korea, and China. Long-term trade negotiations with Asian countries, helping Canada become a stable partner to replace Russia and OPEC. If Canada shifts most of its oil exports to Asia, the U.S. will lose a stable supply source, have to pay an additional $10 per barrel, directly affecting gasoline prices, transportation costs, and consumer prices. Is this the beginning of a new global economic crisis? As close allies turn their backs, as domestic businesses oppose the policies, and as faith in the administration's economic strategy falters, the big question remains, is Trump truly making America great again? Or is this the beginning of a global recession sparked by the U.S.? Stay tuned, because this story has just begun.